Welcome back, baseball fans, to the 1970-73 draft, fourth round draft results. The fourth round is always a fun round in that you know which of the 4 years you're picking for your team, as it's the remaining year that you've avoided at this point as you found talent in the other years. So a lot of times in the fourth round you get some odd picks because you're trying to put a square peg into a round hole kind of thing, and sometimes you hope you have a keeper there that you can rely on, because when you start searching for a specific need, it's like drafting for need. It's not there, you take somebody anyway. But the fourth round is where teams start to go a little sideways if they're not careful. So Cleveland, at the top of the draft, they did okay. They had a keeper of Vicente Romo, so they just plugged him into the bullpen. Just a typical year for this guy. 3.38 ERA, 1.23 WHIP, does the trick. Gets them through the first 4 rounds of the draft, which is what the goal is at this point. And speaking of square into round hole, or whatever you want to call it, Colorado Rockies, but this is a futures pick if there ever was one. The Colorado Rockies took 1972 Rick Auerbach. He's a starting shortstop, had 605 plate appearances, hit 218, but he was an ace stealer with 24 stolen bases. It's a 3 at short. It's not pretty, but it's about future, because next year his 74 card will be available, where he hits over 300 in a small sample size. And then 4 years down the road, he does the same thing in 1978. So that's what you're getting. You've locked into Rick Auerbach's future Strat-O-Matic wizardry, where he basically is a 300 hitter for 8 years, which never really happened. But that's what can happen with a fringe player on a fringe fantasy team like Colorado. So that's what you get. Colorado, Rick Auerbach. Toronto, they also found that they decided they wanted a shortstop who can field, because remember we talked about they were building a pitching staff. So they took Tim Foley, and Tim Foley actually moved around the decade from the Mets to the Expos to the Pirates and so forth. So for now, Toronto seems to be a nice place for him to go, with a nice range at short. A 2, E44. But anyway, we got the range, so that's good. The Cubs. Oh, now a nice little pick. In the year of 1973, Ray Burris. They took 2 guys, actually. Ray Burris just sitting out there in 64 innings with a 2.92 ERA. And then they announced that in the 5th round, they would be taking Del Unser, a nice acquisition last year, who at 289 with a 781 OPS in 1973. Did that for the Phillies. No longer. He's going to do it for the Cubs. Suddenly, the Cubs are having a really nice draft. They've got 6 nice players. Randy Hundley, Fergie Jenkins, Rick Russell, Ray Burris, Del Unser, and Ron Santo. Those are all plus year picks. Value for the year selected. Hundley, the best year for all 6 of these guys, are right there. This is what the Cubs have to hope for in this division with the Reds and Pirates. All right, the Padres had to fill the 1970 shoe, and again, this was the problem, because it's 1970 Padres. So they took a guy, one of the first waivered guys. The guy was put on waivers last year, I believe by the Yankees, and it is actually a Padre farmhand, which is why we took him. Ron Willis, 26-year-old, was actually with the Padres in 70. 4.02 ERA, but a card plays better than that. It looks a nice looking card anyway. And they also announced that in the 8th round they would bring back Al Ferrara as a DH. Again, it's the Padres, nothing really flashy. Again, you see name notes here for future players, and they feel like the last 2 guys will be Randy Jones and Enzo Hernandez, and that pretty much was your Padres from this era. But I think they'll play better than any individual year Padre team would. All right, Texas is having a great draft, another great pick, and also a great future sighting here. I'm excited about this team. So they needed a 71 guy, and instead of settling for the Tim Foley's and Rick Auerbach's of the world, they spotted with a keen eye because of positional value. Frank Lindsay put on waivers because he had a bad 69, but boy, 71 he rebounds with a 2.12 ERA with a 1.28 WHIP. So Frank Lindsay goes right into that Texas bullpen. And they also happen to notice that Toby Harrah will bloom in 73 to be their shortstop. So they're having a nice draft. All right, Atlanta. They took 71 Atlanta pitcher Tom Kelly, who actually was okay for them. In 20 starts in 1971, he had a 2.96 ERA. For Atlanta, that's great. I mean, build from within. The problem was, if you want to avoid a lot of those Brave pitchers with terrible ERAs, but Tom Kelly has pretty good. And I think he only had one really good year, and this was the one. All right, Milwaukee, they had the rights to John Gellner, so they picked it up. He played for Milwaukee at age 27 in 1970. I think he carried over from the Seattle Pilots. He's an okay reliever with a 4.19 ERA. But again, they didn't have to. His card was simply available, so for convenience, they took it. At the end of this draft, they could end up swapping guys out and finding better guys on the street, maybe, for Milwaukee. They're just not going to contend for anything right now. Ohio players had the rights to Elrod Hendricks, and they cashed that in. He's a left-handed hitting catcher with power, with a 0 arm, which is fine, for a platoon guy in this era. Again, you're going to start, this is the 4th round, and from here on out, it's going to be like some odd guys. Diamonds and rough. The diamonds are going to get smaller and smaller. So, Arizona, again, Arizona does something very Colorado Rocky-ish. Arizona took Roger Freed. They actually, because they had won the Commissioner Award, they've exhausted the first 4 picks, so they moved into the second part of the draft. They only have 2 roster spots left, and we only have 1 more pick to make, and we're just in the middle of the draft. But Roger Freed was available, and this is a futures pick. They're going to nurse Roger Freed around until eventually they get his blockbuster 1977 card. So they pick him up now, and they're just going to keep him around until that card blooms. So that's a futures, super futures pick. Auerbach produces for Colorado by 74. Arizona is willing to commit all the way to 1977 just to wait for this Roger Freed card to come into action. Arizona likes to build their team around batting average. Hence the Brock Davis 318 card with a 331 slugging. They like batting average, and Roger Freed brings you more batting average than any baseball player in this era at 398 and 77. So, all right, the Expos. They take Sonny Jackson. And actually, this was part of a trade. Right, okay, that's right. So the Expos, this is what they ended up doing. They drafted Sonny Jackson, and then they traded him to Ohio for left-handed hitting catcher J.C. Martin. That's what they did. That's right. They needed a left-handed catcher to platoon with Bateman. J.C. Martin was available as a left-handed catcher because Ohio drafted Elrod Hendricks here. So they couldn't have 2 lefty catchers, so they sent one to the Expos, and the Expos drafted Sonny Jackson. He will be a center fielder on a team where only Bill Robinson can play center field as a 3E11. Now they have Sonny Jackson as a 3E8 as well. All right, next on the clock, the Cardinals. They needed a shortstop, and, well, they found a guy, a 24-year-old guy in their system named Dwayne Anderson, who has a nice bat. It's a 267. It's a fortunate platoon. He's better against righties than lefties. And so he will play a big chunk of shortstop for the Cardinals this year. They got to find a defensive guy to back him up. Defensive guys are easier to find than offensive guys at shortstop. They'll all hit 141 for you, though, a lot of the times. All right, Florida looked into the 1973 box and said, hey, nothing here. So why don't we just improve Ellie Rodriguez and make him an on-base machine? Ellie Rodriguez has some really nice on-base percentage years from 72 to 76 for the Brewers. Here it's 376. So that's what they're going to try with Florida, since nothing else was available. All right, the White Sox, knowing that, seeing the picks that happened before them, started to get nervous and think that the draft is drying up. So they hurriedly rushed Bob Humphrey's name. He's a keeper for 1970 in there. So they didn't have to explore in deeper waters yet. So Bob Humphreys returns to their bullpen with a 2.92 ERA. So far, the White Sox have made all the right moves. Could be a year in Chicago for the Cubs and White Sox. The Pirates. Okay, so they had to downshift in the last round without Oliver's not a great year, but they decided to get a little cocky here, and Bill Mazeroski's 71 year, he as a platoon player really crushes lefties in a short sample size. So they said, let's pump up to that. He still has the defense. He backs up Rennie Stennett, and he would win a World Series ring. Probably his second one, maybe. Can't remember. Anyway, maybe more than that. I don't know. 1960, right? And 71, or am I misremembering that? So Mazeroski, at age 34, will have a nice 71 card. All right, Seattle finally does the obvious thing instead of trying to surprise us with something weird. They just took Hoyt Wilhelm at age 47. 47-year-old Hoyt Wilhelm is going to be your closer with a 3.40 ERA. Well, it is Seattle. They're an expansion team. They like to take the wild ride, ups and downs, hills and valleys, and they're going to have a wild ride this season. The Phillies punch the clock. Now teams, if you notice, have started to punch the clock with guys they already have as keepers because the experimental picks seemed sketchy prior to this. So Philadelphia says, we're just going to hold on to Johnny Callison for another year. He still delivers his last good year at age 31. He hits .264 with a 788 and 70. After that, he's got a great arm, but after that it starts to, his stick starts to wane. Okay, the Yankees. 71 took Horace Clarke. Horace Clarke's pretty much the same in this period. His prime doesn't get much better than his youth. He's sort of flat lines to about a 255 hitter for about 4 or 5 years. Does the same kind of thing, switch hitter, can hit and run for you. He could steal a base or two. Nothing flashy. They definitely didn't want him to be a 4 at short, so they took this year where he's a 3. Excuse me, a 4 at second base. They took this year where he's a 3 at second base. Gene Michael's a 2 at short to help the Yankee pitching staff. All right, again, Portland keeps Rich Reese. He was sought after last year because a 69 card at 322. The 1970 card doesn't quite match that, of course. He's down to 261, 703. He's sort of like a Jim Spencer kind of guy now. Good leather at first base, but at 28 years old, it looks like he's not a long-term answer. So Rich Reese for one more year, then they'll move on to a new first baseman in 2023, next year. The Twins, they said, oh boy, you know what? Can we improve Chico Cardenas at short? And the answer was, yeah, you can. Defense and home run, 18 homers for Chico Cardenas in 1971 and a 2E12. Let's bump him up. We're the Twins. We're old anyway. I mean, 34, 32, 32, 34, you know. They're old, grizzled, and they just want to go out with a bang. They have to compete with the young Kansas City Royals. The long play, Kansas City will win that battle, but in the short term, Minnesota hopes to beat up on the Royals. All right, Vegas. They added Ted Kubiak in their infield. They had him last year. They brought him back. Kubiak actually hits better than he did last year. Field's worse. He used to be a 3 at short, now he's a 4. But he's a 250 hitter now. Again, not much happening there with that one. All right, Kansas City added Bill Butler, the first pitcher. We talked about that in the last broadcast. They had concentrated on hitting so much. They finally added Bill Butler, who finally, they cleared the deck. They had so many lefties. They had Jim Rooker blocking him and somebody else blocking him. And now Bill Butler can finally... now look at he was 4-12 with a 3.77 ERA in 70 for a really bad actual Kansas City franchise. But we know that the carry-on league version of Kansas City is much better than that. So we think he'll do very well with that 3.77 ERA. Houston. Is this the round they took Billingham? Or was it last round? No, yeah, it was. No, Houston takes 72 Larry Dierker. He pitches on 3 days rest. They took Billingham last round, so they have two horses at the top, Billingham and Dierker, and now they can be comfortable the rest of the draft with the pitching staff. As long as you get two guys who can pitch on 3 days rest, it's not that hard to find the last two guys. Baltimore. They had their choice of left-handed hitting catchers. They could have waited for Johnny Oates in 72 or 73 to platoon with Etchebarren, but they brought back... This is almost like a cocky pick when you know you're great and you want to have some fun and just take a bad player just to see what he'll do. So they took Kurt Blefry's 71 card because he can... You can't see it here. There's not enough room. Let me do this, see if it comes up. Well, he can... Well, he can catch, folks. Doesn't say it there. He can catch, play first, play second, play third, play the outfield. He's going to be in a catching platoon. Again, this column truncates the edge of his position because it's too big. But he plays every position you can imagine. He's 27 years old. He's got some power. And he becomes a lefty catching platoon with Etchebarren. Instead of Elrod Hendricks is gone. They let him go. Clay Dalrymple, they let him go. He's gone. And they didn't want to wait around for Johnny Oates another year. They took Blefry. Oakland is just checking off the boxes to go to the World Series by keep taking their own dudes. And every pick is their own dude thus far. Dick Green. They took the 71 card because he hits 12 home runs. We mentioned Chico Cardenas at 18 and Dick Green at 12. For a 244 hitter, all we care about is that glove at second base, 2E12. Bando, Green, Holtzman, Jackson, and improved Joe Rudi. I think the A's are going to be on the scorched earth schedule this year. The Dodgers, just not happy with this team, what they're doing. I know the first round they did this Don Sutton, Jim Brewer thing to make them the best two pitchers in all of baseball. Okay, great. Congratulations. Win the best two pitchers in baseball award. But most teams are trying to win the World Series. By doing that, the Dodgers now have to add a 71 player, which they did. They took Gary Waslewski, a nice reliever. They had to trade with the Expos, who had the rights to Waslewski, a token. They gave a token to the Expos to get the rights to Gary Waslewski away from him, to go to their bullpen, to finish off their bullpen. But they still have to add 3 more players, all from the same year, 1971. 3 more guys from 1 year of a dwindling card box for 2-year contracts. And they still have plenty of positions to address. Again, you see one empty spot, but don't forget you have an empty spot here and an empty spot here that were created when these guys were improved. And the year for all these guys will end up being 1971. Because Sutton's original card was a 71, and Brewer's original card was a 71. Plus you got a 71 here. So the next 3 cards will all have to be from 1971 for the Dodgers. All right, the Angels are sort of showing that Cinderella's turning into a pumpkin. They're not finding a lot of great stuff. They did find Bobby Valentine and a 302 batting average. In this round, they found Billy Parker as a option at third base, second base, and shortstop. And him and Valentine and Tovar and Sandy Alomar will be in their infield. To me, that does not sound like a playoff kind of infield or team, but it's because there's nothing else out there to get for these guys. And history would suggest that the Angels didn't really compete for much during this time. And last year seems to be an outlier. But who knows, folks? Maybe they can have the same magic they had last year. All right, the Reds. They are quietly going about their business. Everybody knows who they're going to take. They have surprised nobody in this draft. They just went after Pete Rose and Lee May and Wayne Granger. But in 1973, they said, why don't we improve Dave Concepcion so that we get the 2 E21 defense at short, an A stealer, and a 287 hitter. So that's the move there. That's a great move. They have plenty of punch in their lineup, of course, but the only weak link in their offense was Concepcion. Well, no more. So who are you going to pitch around? I mean, they don't. Concepcion, it's 287. Lee May, it's 278 with 864. And Pete Rose, 316. Am I missing a weak link on this team? There's Tony Perez, there's Johnny Bench, Bobby Tolan, Carbo, Tommy Helms. So Tommy Helms, again, because they don't have Joe Morgan, has to bat ninth. They're going to probably get Geronimo in the next round. All right, the Giants. Oh, man, boy. You know, I talk about the realignment that the Giants and the Padres, and to a lesser extent the Astros, had to suffer because the Reds and Dodgers dominated the division in the 1970s. The Giants farm system is pretty remarkable, and I don't know how it didn't work out in the decade, but they had Gary Matthews in the last round with the 73 card. In 72, they had their choice of Ed Goodson and Gary Maddox, Randy Moffett, but they found Jim Barr with a 2.87 ERA and a 1.15 WHIP to go along with McCovey, Marichal, Gary Matthews, and Sam McDowell. I think the Giants got this division. I mean, after looking at the Dodgers, their weird stuff that they're doing, and the fact that the Cincinnati Reds are no longer around, why not have the Giants be the team to roll through the National League West in the 1970s? If they play their cards right, hold on to Gary Matthews, bring in Gary Maddox next year. They already got rid of Willie Mays, who was getting older, to the Mets, and they added 2 tokens in the process. So, Carryover League realignment shines greatly on the San Francisco Giants. Boston, again, completely unfazed by whatever Baltimore or New York does. All 3 teams in the American League East think they're the best, and they can make claims for that. Boston had the best record. Well, 2 years ago, the Orioles won the World Series. Last year, Boston was the number 1 seed in the American League, but lost in the playoffs. And this year, they brought back Mike Andrews to join Tommy Harper, who they traded for, to play second base. So we're getting some, obviously the fireworks that you hope for in Boston. And yeah, just moving along. We love their pitching staff, and their offense is not declining, so Boston's going to be scary. All right, another trade. And this is great for Detroit. Detroit drafted Mo Drabowski as a closer, but traded him to Atlanta with a draft token to get Clete Boyer to play third base. And this is all about last year. This is all about losing the World Series to the Mets last year with Elliot Maddox, Dick Tracewski, and Kevin Collins playing third base and short. This year, they'll have 1 E24 third baseman, Clete Boyer, and 2 E21 shortstop, Ed Brinkman. So Detroit has flipped the switch of what cost them last year, the left side of the infield. Now, history would suggest that their third baseman was Aurelio Rodriguez, but he was unavailable. He's on Las Vegas. So they replaced his oneness range with Clete Boyer's oneness. And lastly, the final pick of the first 4 rounds, the New York Mets. This is just an okay pick. They took Dave Marshall, one of their farmhands, who in 72 hit 250 with a 705 OPS. He'll work corner outfield with Frank Johnson, and statistically, he'll be just as good as Ken Singleton was last year. Singleton hit 265 on his Strat-O-Matic card. But what happened was Singleton overachieved and hit 360 during the actual league. And that's a big reason why the Mets won the World Series. So the Mets pretty much have steadied the defense, and with Frank Johnson and Dave Marshall in right field. They gain offense from Tommy Agee to Willie Mays in center. So they add offense, more offense in center, less offense in right. And that's the end of the first 4 rounds of the draft. Thanks for checking out the video. We'll see you next time.